Hello everyone. This is the 15th part of the story, Magical Journey in Harry Potter World. Chapter 57, Harry Potter and Tom Marvolo Riddle. "You are an idiot," yelled Ivy, glaring at her brother, who was looking away from her. "You hissed at people in the library. Everybody there heard you hissing." She tore a handful of grass from the ground and threw it at him. "What were you thinking?" "I wasn't thinking, all right," barked Harry, cleaning the blades of grass from his clothes. "They were being stupid, so I just did it to scare them." "They are already plenty scared of you," scoffed Hermione, looking at the Black Lake in the distance. The castle had become a little too stuffy for Harry. So the gang decided to take a walk, spending their time outside, away from the eyes of everyone in the castle. "I don't understand what is wrong with everyone," Ron chimed in, lying in the grass. "Harry isn't the heir of Slytherin. I am sure that it is that Git, Malfoy. Just look at him, he hates Muggle and Muggleborns." "And, if he had held his tongue for a few more days," said Ivy, pointing at Harry, "then the Polyjuice Potion would have allowed us to get some information. Do you know how difficult it is to move around the castle with eyes following you everywhere?" From the looks of it, Ivy was more worried about this situation than Harry. While the girl twin was pulling her hair in frustration, the boy twin was silently brooding. Harry decided he needed some time alone, away from Ivy's occasional glares and Hermione's quips. He stood up from his spot, ready to leave. "Now, where are you going?" asked Ivy. "I just need some time alone," replied Harry, brushing his clothes. "Don't follow me." Ivy tried to stop him, but Harry ignored his sister and walked away from his friends, deciding to return to the castle. This wasn't how he wanted his second year to go. Last year, he had spent worrying about Snape and how he was trying to steal Philosopher's Stone, but in the end, it turned out it wasn't Snape, but Voldemort stuck to the back of his defense against dark arts, Quirrell. An entire year of his scar hurting, occasional headaches, and burning pains were stressful for him. Not to mention he had almost lost his sister to a troll. She would disagree. Thinking about his second year, Harry had hoped to be free of situations like these and hoped that it would be a carefree year with no extraordinary events, but it wasn't in his luck. Even before his year started, Harry had met with an oddity, a house elf by the name of Dobby, who warned him not to go to Hogwarts this year, talking about a danger that awaited him, but Harry had ignored the elf's ramblings and thought little about them. At the start of the year, he and Ron had been blocked from entering Platform 9 3/4. They had flown to Hogwarts in Ron's father's car. Which, in foresight, was an idiotic decision. A decision that had almost gotten him expelled. Harry's mum had scolded him for hours and had been angry with him for a couple of weeks. Even his usual chill dad had been furious at Harry because multiple Muggles had noticed the car flying in the sky. Not to mention that the Whomping Willow had almost killed them by crushing the car while they were inside it. He and Ron got dirty looks from Professor Sprout because of the damage to the tree by the car. His new defense against dark arts didn't turn out like he imagined and taught them nothing and just made them recreate the scenes from his books, and had them write poems about him and his achievements. His detentions with Lockhart were a menial work of replying to fan letters. And listening to him ramble on how to get famous and earn fame. Then came the whole Chamber of Secret debacle with the heir of Slytherin. Harry was determined the heir, as many people suspected him of being the heir and petrified Filch's cat. He and his friends were sure that Draco was the heir of Slytherin from the way he enjoyed looking at the bloody message, and his very public despise of Muggles and Muggleborns. Hermione had come up with the plan to use the Polyjuice Potion to infiltrate the Slytherin house and gain some information, but in the time required to brew the potion, Colin Creevey had also been petrified. And he had found that the murderous bludger during the Quidditch game was Dobby the house elf's doing so that Harry would get injured and go back home. Harry has almost strangled the scrawny elf in anger. Above that, Harry had been hearing some disturbing voices about killing, blood, ripping, and all kinds of creepy dialogues. He had tried to share this with his friends, but it seemed no one else could hear the voices. Just when he thought that the year couldn't get worse, he, and the rest of the school, found that he was a Parselmouth and could speak the language of the serpentine creatures. Something that was widely associated with dark wizards. From that situation, Justin Finch Fletchley had freaked out when he had tried to help him by asking the snake to leave Justin alone. The fallout was Justin being a Scarday cat, and the entire school had made up their minds that he was the heir of Slytherin. Bloody Fletchley, cursed Harry, stamping his feet as he walked. "If I get my hands on him, he is looking for an ass whooping." Harry stamped up the stairs and turned along another corridor, which was particularly dark. A strong, icy draft that was blowing through a loose windowpane had extinguished the torches. He was halfway down the passage when he tripped headlong over something lying on the floor. He turned to squint at what he had fallen over and felt as though his stomach had dissolved. Justin Finch Fletchley was lying on the floor, rigid and cold, a look of shock frozen on his face, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. And that wasn't all. Next to him was another figure, the strangest sight Harry had ever seen. It was nearly headless Nick, no longer pearly white and transparent, but black and smoky, floating immobile and horizontal, 6 inches off the floor. His head was half off, and his face wore an expression of shock identical to Justin's. Harry got to his feet, his breathing fast and shallow, his heart doing a kind of drum roll against his ribs. When he said he was going to get his hands on Justin, he meant nothing like this. He looked wildly up and down the deserted corridor and saw a line of spiders scuttling as fast as they could away from the bodies. The only sounds were the muffled voices of teachers from the classes on either side. I could run, and no one would ever know I had been here. Harry thought, but he couldn't just leave them lying here. He had to get help. Would anyone believe he had nothing to do with this? As he stood there, panicking, a door right next to him opened with a bang. Peeves the poltergeist came shooting out. "Why, it's Potty wee Potter," cackled Peeves, knocking Harry's glasses askew as he bounced past him. "What's Potter up to? Why is Potter lurking dash?" Peeves stopped, halfway through a mid-air somersault. Upside down, the ghost spotted Justin and nearly headless Nick. He flipped the right way up, filled his lungs, and before Harry could stop him, screamed. "Attack! Attack! Another attack! No mortal or ghost is safe. Run for your lives! Attack!" Crash, 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 door after door flew open along the corridor, and people flooded out. For several long minutes, there was a scene of such confusion that Justin was in danger of being squashed, and people kept standing in nearly headless Nick. Harry found himself pinned against the wall as the teachers shouted for quiet. Professor McGonagall came running, followed by her own class, one of whom still had black and white striped hair. She used her wand to set off a loud bang, which restored silence and ordered everyone back into their classes. No sooner had the scene cleared somewhat than Ernie the Hufflepuff arrived, panting, on the scene. "Caught in the act!" Ernie yelled, his face stark white, pointing his finger dramatically at Harry. Peeves was bobbing overhead, now grinning wickedly, surveying the scene. Peeves always loved chaos. As the teachers bent over Justin and nearly headless Nick, examining them, Peeves broke into song. "Oh, Potter, you rotter, oh, what have you done? You're killing off students, you think it's good fun dash." "That's enough, Peeves," barked Professor McGonagall, and Peeves zoomed away backward, with his tongue out at Harry. Professor Flitwick and Professor Sinistra of the astronomy department carried Justin up to the hospital wing, but nobody seemed to know what to do for nearly headless Nick. In the end, Professor McGonagall conjured a large fan out of thin air, which she gave to Ernie with instructions to waft nearly headless Nick up the stairs. This Ernie did, fanning Nick along with like a silent black hovercraft. This left Harry and Professor McGonagall alone together. "This way, Potter," she said. "Professor," said Harry at once, "I swear I didn't dash." "This is out of my hands, Potter," replied Professor McGonagall curtly. They marched in silence around a corner, and she stopped before a large and exceptionally ugly stone gargoyle. "I am screwed," Harry thought as he stared at the gargoyle, so screwed. Hogwarts hadn't changed in the years he had studied here in his day. The castle was the same as ever, a magical and majestic building standing for a millennium. The professors and students had changed, but that changed nothing in the ambience of the mystical castle of Hogwarts. Children's chatter, portraits passing their time, the spectres floating around the corridors, and house elves hurrying around doing their work. Everything was the same as the time he had studied and stayed here. In the night's cover, he roamed in the spacious corridors, feeling the cool breeze caressing his face. He had been walking around Hogwarts ever since he had got here. It was his home, after all. It was the only place that accepted him, provided him shelter and the means to be different than others like he always meant to be. Being sorted into the Slytherin house was a nod to his ancestor Salazar Slytherin. The proof that the blood in his veins was of a noble lineage, a genealogy of the highest order. He saw it as the sign that he was meant to great things and destined to stand above others. Due to his exceptional acting abilities, he could convince virtually all the Hogwarts staff and instructors that this facade was his true personality. The sole exception to this was Dumbledore, who, though not necessarily suspicious of him, never forgetting about his misdeeds or his unsettling behavior during their first meeting. In turn, he realized that he had been careless in showing Dumbledore his true character upon their first meeting, and never attempted to win him over as he had with his other instructors. In time, he came to fear and despise Dumbledore. The old goat was too much of a hindrance to him. But, now he was here, and Dumbledore had no idea that it was all his doing. Gazing down, he admired the green trims on the clothing, fitting to his status as a member of House Slytherin. The greatest of the four, the noblest of them. And the one who knew what was best for the wizarding world. He made his way to the gloomiest, most depressing bathroom he had ever set foot in. Under a large, cracked, and spotted mirror were a row of chipped sinks. The floor was damp and reflected the dull light given off by the stubs of a few candles, burning low in their holders. The wooden doors to the stalls were flaking and scratched, and one of them was dangling off its hinges. Looking around, he saw that the girl wasn't there, maybe occupying another bathroom in the castle. It was better this way. He didn't want the girl to stare at him every time he visited here, it got bothersome quickly. He walked to one of the unassuming sinks in the tattered bathroom and looked at one of the copper taps with a small snake engraved on it. A smile made it on his face at the sight of the little snake. "Open," he said. Except that the words weren't in English, a strange hissing had escaped him, and at once, the tap glowed with a brilliant white light and spun. Next second, the sink moved. The sink, in fact, sank right out of sight, leaving a large pipe exposed, a pipe wide enough for a man to slide into. He lowered himself slowly into the pipe, then let go. It was like rushing down an endless, slimy, dark slide. He could see more pipes branching off in all directions, but none as broad as his, which twisted and turned, sloping steeply downward, and knew that he was falling deeper below the school than even the dungeons. At the end of the pipe's end, he jumped and expertly landed on the damp floor of a dark stone tunnel large enough to stand in. Lumos, he chanted the incantation, and his wand's tip lit up with white. Walking on the tunnel's wet floor made loud slapping noise against the water, and the light from the wand cast shadows on the soaking walls that looked monstrous in the wand light. The tunnel was quiet as a graveyard at night, and the only sound was the occasional crunch made when he stepped on the bones of small animals like rats littered around the floor. The wand light shone the path after a dark bend and shed light over a gigantic snakeskin of a vivid, poisonous green, lying curled and empty across the tunnel floor. The creature that had shed it must have been 20 feet long at least. He smiled as he glided his hand against the snakeskin, feeling its texture as he walked beside the humongous shedding. And then, at last, as he crept around yet another bend, he saw a solid wall ahead on which two entwined serpents were carved, their eyes set with great, glinting emeralds. "Open," came the words in a low, faint hiss. The serpents parted as the wall cracked open, the halves slid smoothly out of sight. Inside stood at the end of a very long, dimly lit chamber. Towering stone pillars entwined with more carved serpents rose to support a ceiling lost in darkness, casting long, black shadows through the odd, greenish gloom that filled the place. Every footstep echoed loudly off the shadowy walls as the hollow eye sockets of the stone snakes seemed to be following him. Then, as he drew level with the last pair of pillars, a statue high as the chamber itself loomed into view, standing against the back wall. He had to crane his neck to look up into the giant face above. It was ancient and monkeyish, with a long, thin beard that fell almost to the bottom of the wizard's sweeping stone robes, where two enormous grey feet stood on the smooth chamber floor. "Speak to me, Slytherin, greatest of the Hogwarts four," he hissed and watched as the giant stone face moved, mouth opening, wider and wider, to make a huge black hole. And something was stirring inside the statue's mouth. Something was slithering up from its depths. "Come out," he smiled as he watched the enormous body hit the stone floor of the chamber. A serpent uncoiled itself from Slytherin's mouth. He stared at the titanic serpent as it stared back at him. If he had been anyone else, he would have been dead with a single look from the King of Serpents. But because he spoke in the language of snakes, Parseltongue, the Basilisk didn't kill him with the gaze that could kill with a single glance. A translucent third eyelid covered its acid yellow eyes, blocking the innate magic that resided in the basilisk's eyes. The translucent eyelids were part of Basilisk's biology, present there in case the snake didn't want to use its killing gaze. You did well. Another mudblood down. Just like the great Slytherin wanted, he hissed at the snake. More, kill, rip, blood. The basilisk hissed in reply. The basilisk was a dreadful and dangerous beast. A horrifying monster with dark green scales, that creature was a violent and bloodthirsty beast of titanic size. After being put to sleep inside the chamber for centuries, it wanted nothing but to get out and rampage. More will come, he laughed, as soon as I gain a body, we will reap lives of those who are inferior and unworthy. He laughed loudly and proclaimed. Soon, I, Tom Marvolo Riddle, will return to this world as Lord Voldemort and take my rightful place as the ruler of wizardkind and beyond. But before that, Riddle took out a diary from his robes and spoke, I want to know more about Harry Potter, the boy who lived. I want to know how a 1-year-old babe took down my future. Riddle planned to get the diary to the boy, wanting to find more about him and what he possessed to defeat the Dark Lord. The basilisk hissed something that made Riddle chuckle in reply, yes, he will be quite fun to play with. He looked at the basilisk and recalled, he has a mudblood girl in his entourage, we should go for her next. The basilisk hissed in horrid glee, thrashing its tail in delight. A boy and basilisk stood in a dreary chamber, planning to go after their next victim. Chapter 58, Teaching the Slytherin Duo. Oh boy, you have been eating a lot these past few weeks, haven't you? Asked Eddie as he looked to his side. If you didn't eat with proper table manners, you would be indistinguishable from Marcus. Quinn ate another piece of sausage before speaking, I have been feeling starved these past few weeks. He swallowed a mouthful of fries and continued, it is like there is a bottomless pit in my stomach. I am here to tell you something, my friend, you can eat and eat and eat, but nothing will ever fill that void, spoke Marcus from across the table, you want a slice of banoffee pie? I feel you, brother, said Quinn, pointing his fork at Marcus, and, yes, I will take 2 slices. My sweet tooth is tingling. Quinn food moaned as he ate some of the banoffee pie that Marcus passed on to him. An orange hue developed on his nape as Quinn indulged himself in the delicious food. Maybe I should live in the kitchen with the house elves, thought Quinn as he nodded towards Marcus while pointing towards the dessert. This is damn good. The last few weeks had been brilliant for Anta Quinn. He had found himself enjoying his student life, feeling that he was on cloud 7 all the time. He always had a skip in his step, a smile on his face, and joy in his words. He felt nothing could pull him down to earth. Quinn was sure that if the number of times he had broken into songs were stringed together, they would be enough for an entire script of a musical play. His magic had been improving every day at a visible rate, and Quinn couldn't be more excited than seeing his connection with his magic improve every other day. It was like he had been wearing weights all his life, and now they were removed. Casting spells was becoming easier, and his magic responded to him faster and smoother like never before. If his magic before the improvement was him pulling water out of well, and he had to work to mold his magic into spells, then right now, his magic was waiting for him to give a single command, and it would spring out with no effort. His magic was a servant waiting to fulfill his every whim. No adversity could make him feel helpless and hopeless. Spending time in room of requirement to destroy things was becoming his new hobby. If someone stumbled upon the room of requirement during Quinn's occupancy, they would have a heart attack by the sheer amount of destructive and dark magic remnants in the room. The pure exhilaration Quinn felt when he exerted his magic to annihilate everything in his way, a feeling beyond words. It made him feel powerful beyond measure. He felt empowered, it made him feel like he could do anything, and nothing was outside his capabilities. Quinn finished his meal, patting his belly in culinary satisfaction, and tap-danced his way outside the great hall. When Quinn turned a bend, a stone-faced blonde greeted him, scaring the shit out of him. Bloody hell! Quinn jumped back in shock as he stared at Daphne Greengrass standing there with her arms crossed. Hello, said Tracy, revealing herself from behind Daphne with a grin on her face and twinkled in her eye. She covered her mouth in laughter and commented, that was wicked fun. Yeah, it was wicked scary. You almost scared the soul out of my body. Quinn patted his heart and asked, what is it? Tracy stepped forward and asked, we were wondering if you would help us with a spell. We have been having some problems with the cast. Quinn quirked his brow and spoke, "Sure, I can help." "What is the spell?" "It is the seize and pull spell," replied Daphne. Her face was twisted in frustration and irritation. The spell had been giving her and Tracy a lot of problems. No matter how much they tried, the magic refused to operate properly. Quinn's eyes shined in joy. "Oh boy, carpe retractum. The seize and pull." He clapped his hands. "Do you know it is one of my favorite spells?" "So, you will help us?" asked Daphne, surprising Quinn with her forwardness. She usually let Tracy do the talking, but right now, she was taking the lead. The truth was that Daphne didn't like things she couldn't figure out, and this spell had been giving her problems longer than she anticipated. "All right, I will help out," said Quinn. "I am free today, so do you want to start after classes?" "Yes," replied both the girls in unison. "Perfect, then it is decided," smiled Quinn. "We will meet after classes." Daphne and Tracy entered the classroom in which the three had decided to meet and practice. There they saw Quinn sitting there on a stool. It looked like he hadn't noticed the two Slytherin girls enter the room. He was sitting there with a dazed look on his face. Looking into the distance with a blank look on his face. Daphne and Tracy stilled for a moment and stared at Quinn with mild surprise. In the time they had known Quinn, they had never seen him like this, doing nothing and zoning out while sitting in a chair. Every time they had seen Quinn, he was doing something. Quinn would always have something to do, like read a book, or scribble or draw on a paper, or talking to someone, but never in their time had these two seen Quinn doing, well, nothing. Then there was the look in his eyes. The Quinn they knew always had a focused look in his eyes, like he was always thinking and on point, and the depth in his stone-grey orbs reflected the knowledge held in them. The current shallow and dazed was out of place for Quinn. And finally, the thing that stood out was Quinn's posture. No matter what the time, Quinn always sat with his back straight and shoulders back, but the Quinn in front of them had a slouch in his posture. His back was curved, and shoulders hunched slightly. It was so unusual that Daphne and Tracy felt worried for Quinn, seeing him so different from his usual self. There was a feeling of conflict rising inside them. There was a stark difference between this version of Quinn and the image of Quinn they had in their mind. Tracy stepped forward and carefully voiced, "Hey Quinn, are you all right?" Her words seemed to snap Quinn out of his daze as he turned his face to the duo. The two girls saw focus return to Quinn's eyes as he stood up from his stool, recognition flashing in his eyes. A smile bloomed on his face as he greeted them. "Good evening, you two. Now that you are here, let's get started." Daphne and Tracy stared at Quinn with another bout of shock at the sudden change in energy. Just a moment ago, Quinn looked like he could sit on his stool doing nothing but stare at the wall for hours, but the next second, he was on his feet, full of rigor and ready to get the practice session started. "Hey Quinn, are you sure you are all right?" asked Tracy, still worried about her friend. "We can do this another day if you aren't feeling well." Quinn turned his body towards them, a confused expression clear on his face, like he wasn't sure what Tracy was talking about. "What do you mean?" he chuckled. "There is nothing wrong with me. In fact, I can't be feeling any better." Quinn clapped his hands and showed a confused wrinkle in his brows. "Come on, let's get moving, or do you not want to learn?" Tracy looked at Daphne and asked her best friend what to do with her eyes. Daphne turned to look at Quinn, who was peering at them with a confused look on his face, his hands raised, asking them what was happening. Daphne also felt a little worried about Quinn, but looking at him now, he looked normal. "Let's start," said Daphne, announcing her decision to the other two in the room. "That is the spirit," grinned Quinn. "Okay, stand here." "Yeah, side by side like that." "Excellent." Daphne and Tracy stood side by side, standing close to one of the classroom's walls, and took out their wands at ready. Quinn, who had walked to the stool he was sitting at before, looked back and saw the two girls with their wands out. He waved his hands and spoke, "All right, let's sheath the wands for just a minute or two." He picked up 2 ropes from the corner and walked to the girls, handing them each a rope. Quinn smiled when he saw the confused look on their faces. The seize and pull spell produces a magical, retractable cord of light that could be used to pull objects towards the caster, or, if the target was fixed in place, to pull the caster towards the target. He pulled out his fake wand, and the ropes uncurled into straight lines, another swing, and 2 iron weights transfigured on the ends of the ropes. The irons had substantial weight, but weren't heavy enough for the girls to have difficulty pulling. So, you are going to be pulling when you seize and pull spell, so it would be good if you know what does it feel like to pull something. He raised his hands when Daphne was about to speak. I know you know what it is like to pull things, but do it now so it is fresh in your mind. He walked between the two ropes and continued, I am making you pull these weights because if you do it now, you would remember it more vividly than ever before. Your brain knows that I am making you do it for the spell, so it would remember the sensation much more clearly. Now, pull on those ropes and get a clear feeling. He gestured towards the rope before stepping to the side. Go. The two girls looked skeptical at the exercise, but did it anyway, putting both of their hands on the rope and then pulling at the iron weights. Let me ask you a question, spoke Quinn, gaining their attention. When you learn a spell, do you understand it better when you learn the mechanics behind it? When the professor explains what the spell is actually doing, does it help? Of course, that is obvious, replied Tracy, pulling on the rope. Quinn nodded and explained, understanding and comprehension are an essential part of the magic. If you understand what you are doing, things get a lot easier, much simpler. He raised his fake wand and pointed it at his other open palm, and a miniature version of Quinn in ice appeared on his palm. Knowing means having control over what you are doing, and control in lack of better words is good. He walked in between the two girls and faced the same way they did. The seize and pull spell is a retractable cord, so while you won't be pulling and your magic would be doing the work for you. Quinn raised his fake wand and shot out a red-yellow cord of light at the opposing wall. The end of the cord attached itself to the wall, sticking to the surface. Daphne and Tracy looked at the end attached to the wall to Quinn, who put his hand on the cord, and their eyes widened when they saw the cord detached from the wand tip and rest in Quinn's hand. How are you doing that? Exclaimed Daphne. You can't detach the cord from the wand. That should break the spell. If you know what you are doing. If you understand the mechanics, Quinn cracked a smile, you will have control over what you are doing. He pulled on the cord, and girls could see it taut because of the pull. Now, that was enough. Quinn waved his fake wand, the weights vanished, and the ropes curled up. Let's see you girls try it. He took a step back, giving space to the girl. Carpe retractum is the incantation, and the wand movement is in the shape of V. Now, off you go. The two girls readied their wands, pointed them at the wall, and cast Carpe retractum. Two flimsy cords of light shot out of their wands, darting towards the wall, but fell down to the floor before reaching it. The two turned back to look at Quinn, and the older Ravenclaw just said, both of you have to be more aggressive, provide more magic. And if I am right, you guys should focus more on the wall. The spell would conjure the cord for you, you need to want the cord to go to the wall. Here, look at this, said Quinn, stepping forward and pointing his fake wand at the stool. A thick cord of light shot out of his wand and wrapped around the bar stool in the distance. See, I made the cord wrap around the bar stool. It usually sticks, but because I wanted it to wrap around the target. You have to be clear about what you are doing. He gestured to them to try again. The two girls raised their wands, and as Quinn instructed, they focused more on the wall. Both wanted their cords to stick to the wall in front of them. Carpe retractum. Two cords of light exploded out of their wands and darted towards the wall. Both cords reached the wall and stuck to the surface. Daphne's cord was faster than Tracy's and struck the wall first. Excellent, well done, congratulated Quinn, but, hold it, don't stop the spell. He stepped forward, walking halfway to the opposing wall. H flicked both the cord to check them the tangibility and pulled on them to see the adhesive quality at the end. He nodded before turning to them, all right, everything seems good. Tracy, you have to work on getting the cord faster to the target, but yours stuck more firmly to the wall. He turned to Daphne and remarked, Daphne, you had a great launch, but you need to work on the tangibility of your cord. It looks like it would snap if there is too much weight at the end. Quinn met with Daphne and Tracy a couple more times to walk them through the spell. Today, we are going to pull on stuff, Quinn said, standing in front of the two girls. Did you two practice in your own time? We did, the girls replied. All right, then let's move on. He pointed to the two bar stools and said, aim at the bar stools and pull them towards you. Wands at ready, he instructed while stepping out of the way, go nuts. Red-yellow cords of light darted to the bar stools and adhered to the wood. The girls had enough practice with the spell and could stick the cords to the target with outstanding success. Quinn silently watched from the side, observing them cast the magic, trying to pull the bar stool towards them, but their efforts were giving irregular success at best. "You guys are pulling your arms back to pull, don't do that," spoke Quinn as he stepped forward and pointed at their arms. "The magic is a retractable cord, you don't have to physically pull on the cord, you have to retract it." Quinn put his hand and took out a standard yellow retractable tape measure, showing it to the girls. It was one of the things that resided in Quinn's robes. "Take this for an example." He pulled the metallic tape measure out of its casing. "Now, observe," he continued and released the tape, and the girls watched as the yellow metal strip rushed back inside the casing. "It is something like this," said Quinn, "this what you call retractable. You need to suck in the magical cord back into your wand." He walked to their front and grinned mischievously. Taking out his fake wand, he pointed it at Tracy and shot out the cord of Cezanne Paul's spell. The cord wrapped around her. Tracy let out a surprised yelp before she screamed when she was pulled towards Quinn, who caught her with his arms and spun her around in circles, while Tracy laughed in fun with little fear mixed in. Quinn widely grinned as he put Tracy down, who walked unsteadily because of the dizziness and walked like a drunk person. Daphne shifted her gaze from Tracy to Quinn and saw the grin, and her eyes widened in realization. "Oh no, you don't," but she was late as Quinn had already shot a Cezanne Paul cord towards her. She let out a similarly startled yelp when she was pulled towards Quinn. Unlike Tracy, she wasn't spun around circles and was held close to Quinn. He took her waist with his hands, holding her close to him. When she looked up towards Quinn's face, she saw a smile different from Quinn's usual smile. She saw Quinn raise his hand and tuck a stray strand of her hair behind her ear. "If you weren't a second year, I would have invited you out to Hogsmeade," she heard Quinn speak. "What a pity." He pulled her closer for a second before letting her go and moving to Tracy, helping her stand up. She had sat down because of the dizziness. Daphne Greengrass stood in a distracted daze, thinking about what had just happened. She didn't know what to make of the interaction she just had with Quinn. One thing was for sure, she wouldn't be forgetting about this for a long time. After 5 lessons in 2 weeks, Quinn trained Daphne and Tracy in the Cezanne pull to the point that they could pull it off every single time flawlessly. Their original flimsy cords had thickened to something respectable, and they could pull anything with reasonable weight towards them without breaking a sweat. Chapter 59, Polyjuice Incident, Debt, and Diary. Harry Potter, Ronald Weasley, Hermione Granger, and Ivy Potter were planning an infiltration operation into the Slytherin House common room by employing the miraculous Polyjuice Potion. The potion allowed a person to change their appearance to someone else's, and all it took was a strand of their hair. The 4 Gryffindors stood in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, gathered around the stall that issued thick black smoke while Hermione stirred the cauldron full of bubbling, glutinous potion. "Does everyone have the hairs of their targets?" asked Hermione. When the other 3 nodded, Hermione continued, "Good, now we need to separate the potion into the 4 glasses and add the hairs." While Hermione poured the Polyjuice Potion into goblets, Ivy spoke up, "I sneaked these spare robes out of the laundry. Throwing a sack on the floor, we will need robes with Slytherin trims, so wear these before exiting here." The 4 of them stared into the cauldron. Close up, the potion looked like thick, dark mud, bubbling sluggishly. "I'm sure I've done everything right," said Hermione, nervously rereading the splotched page of most potent potions. "It looks like the book says it should. Once we've drunk it, we'll have exactly an hour before we change back into ourselves." Hermione handed the goblets to her 3 friends and instructed, "Add your hairs to the goblets." The 4 added the hair into the bubbling goblets and watched as the potion hissed loudly like a boiling kettle and frothed madly. Harry Potter added Gregory Goyle's hair strand into his potion and watched as it turned into khaki color. Ron Weasley added Vincent Crabbe's hair strand into his goblet and the potion frothed before turning a dark, murky brown. Hermione Granger dropped a strand of hair from Tracy Davis into hers and it turned into a lilac color. At last, Ivy Potter inserted a blonde strand from the head of Daphne Greengrass and watched as an icy blue color spread through the potion. "Now, get into the stalls and down them," said Ivy. "Don't drink them out here and change before drinking because your clothes won't fit." "Good call," commented Ron, picking a set of clothes from the sack, and the others followed. Careful not to spill a drop of their Polyjuice Potion, the Golden Squad slipped into their individual stalls. "Ready?" called out Harry. "Ready," came Ron's, Hermione's, and Ivy's reply. 1, 2, 3 pinching their noses, the 4 chugged down their potion in 2 to 3 gulps. There were groans and grunts from all four people before there was silence, followed by gasps of shock, and finally, the rustling of clothes could be heard at the end. 3 people came out at the same time and looked at each other with a stunned expression. "This is unbelievable," said Ron, approaching the mirror and prodding Crabbe's flat nose. "Unbelievable." His voice was exactly the same as Crabbe's, and it surprised Ron a lot. "This is wicked," and jarring at the same time, Goyle's low rasp of a voice issued from Harry's mouth. The 2 transformed boys turned their heads to look at Ivy, who had altered into Daphne Greengrass, watching herself in a broken mirror with a complicated expression on her face. Harry, Goyle, and Ron, Crabbe, watched with wide eyes as Ivy, Daphne, exhaled before an expressionless look took its place on Daphne Greengrass's face. "Wow," exclaimed Ron, "she looks exactly like her." If Ron didn't know that the girl in front of her was Ivy, he would have bet his entire pocket money on Daphne Greengrass standing in front of him. Harry silently watched his sister put on the same expression as Daphne. He could understand the complicated look before the expressionless face. His twin sister and Daphne Greengrass did have a complicated relationship. "Are you sure that Greengrass and Davis won't walk in on us?" asked Harry. While Harry and Ron had put Crabbe and Goyle to sleep with mild sleeping potions, Tracy and Daphne were still awake and in the castle. Ivy stared at Daphne's face in the mirror for a while before replying, "At this time, Tracy and Daphne are in the library doing their homework. Those 2 follow this schedule without fail." She paused before continuing, "She is quite methodical about it." She sighed before speaking, "We have plenty of time before those 2 will return to the Slytherin common room, so we don't have to worry about them." Harry nodded before noticing that Hermione wasn't out of her stall. "Hermione, come on, we need to go," he called out while banging on Hermione's door. A high-pitched voice answered him. I don't think I'm going to come after all. You go on without me." "Hermione, we know Tracy Davis differs greatly from you, but no one's going to know it's you. No, really, I don't think I'll come." "You 3 hurry up, you are wasting time, said Hermione in a weirdly high-pitched voice. Harry looked at Ron, bewildered. "That looks more like Goyle," said Ron. "That's how he looks every time a teacher asks him a question." "Hermione, are you okay?" asked Ivy through the door. "Fine, I'm fine." "Go on," came Hermione's response. Ivy looked at her watch. 5 of their precious 60 minutes had already passed. "We will meet you back here, all right," she said. And so Harry, Goyle, Ron, Crabbe, and Ivy, Daphne, were off to the Slytherin House common room. Harry, Goyle, and Ron, Crabbe, walked ahead while Ivy, Daphne, walked a distance behind them because Daphne Greengrass wouldn't hang out, much less walk with the dumb duo of Slytherin. The 3 went down the marble staircase. All they needed now was a Slytherin that they could follow to the Slytherin common room, but there was nobody around. "Any ideas?" muttered Harry. Harry and Ron didn't know where the Slytherin common room was located in the dungeons. "The Slytherins always come up to breakfast from over there," said Ron, nodding at the entrance to the dungeons. The words had barely left his mouth when a boy with black hair emerged from the entrance. "Excuse me," said Ron, hurrying up to her. "We've forgotten the way to our common room." Ivy, Daphne, who just turned the bend, looked at the duo and frowned. What in the world are those 2 doing? She heard the last part of the sentence and had the urge to slap her forehead and then beat the 2 with a beater's bat. They didn't know the location of Slytherin common room, thought Ivy. Of course, they didn't. These idiots. The Ravenclaw boy looked at them with interest and chuckled. "I beg your pardon." He pointed at his tie and trims on his robes. "Our common room." "I'm a Ravenclaw." "You guys must be really dumb." The Ravenclaw boy laughed till tears were coming out of his eyes. He looked them straight in their eyes and said, "Don't get lost, all right." Ivy felt embarrassed at her twin brother and their friend, not only because they jumped into the plan without knowing the first part, and because the person who was laughing at them was the one person who she didn't want them to be embarrassed in front of. The Ravenclaw with black hair had stone-grey eyes, and there was only one Ravenclaw with those features. "Quinn West," groaned Ivy. She watched as Harry and Ron hurried down the stone steps into the darkness, their footsteps echoing particularly loudly as Crabbe's and Goyle's huge feet hit the floor. Quinn chuckled as he watched the 2 climb down to the dungeon and turned back to see Daphne standing there, and his eyes flashed. "Greengrass," he waved and smiled, "fancy meeting you here." Ivy, Daphne, froze when she saw Quinn walk towards her but quickly gathered herself and spoke in a Daphne-esque fashion. Quinn. Where is Tracy? Asked Quinn, looking behind her. You two are usually together. She is in the library. She was behind on her homework, replied Ivy. Daphne. Oh, is that so? Said Quinn. He thought of something and looked worried. Is it because of the Duro Transfiguration spell? Did she spend too much time practicing the spell? Quinn sounded apologetic and continued, we have been practicing it a lot together. Maybe we should pull back a little. Ivy, who didn't know about what Quinn was speaking, just nodded. How about you? Asked Quinn. Are you comfortable transfiguring various materials into stone? Of course, spoke Ivy, imitating Daphne. It wasn't that difficult after I understood it. She replied such that even though her expression remained unchanged, her voice portrayed pride. Quinn smiled and then seemed to recall something. Before I forget. I got the thing that you wanted. He put his hands in his robes, and the thing that came out was his wand. Ivy's, Daphne's, eyes widened as she felt ropes conjure around her and tightened around her body. The ropes pulled her back, and she was slammed against the wall. The next second, the wall behind her transfigured into a liquid form, covered her entire body, and hardened to trap her inside. What are you doing? Shrieked Ivy. Daphne, looking angry and furious. You are not Daphne Greengrass. Quinn looked at her. She felt his eyes were looking right through her. So, who are you? What bloody nonsense are you talking about? She screamed, feeling panic bubbling inside her. Quinn peered at her and said, you see, when I called you Greengrass, you didn't show any reaction. Ivy felt confused at the statement, but Quinn cleared it for her. Recently, I switched the way I address her. I call her Daphne now, Quinn explained. She would roll her eyes at the start, but now she doesn't even bat an eye. With her personality, she would definitely quip at me reverting back to her family name. Next, we never practiced the Duro spell, so that gave you away, said. That was the second strike. Ivy was the full force of panic and couldn't think of anything to speak or rebuke. And, the last strike is this. Quinn raised his hand to reveal a wand in his hand. This isn't Daphne's wand. Ivy's eyes almost popped out, and she nearly screamed at Quinn to return her wand back. When did he take it from me? Thought Ivy. So, you clearly not Daphne Greengrass. Which prompts the question, if you are not Daphne, then who are you? Quinn spoke as he looked at the wand in his hand. A sound came out of him as he narrowed his eyes and then looked up at Daphne look-alike. You know, now that I remember. There was a break-in in Professor Snape's potion ingredient storage. Now that I see you in the form of Daphne, the stolen ingredients were of the Polyjuice Potion, weren't they? A wide smirk formed on his face as he said, Professor Snape would be delighted if he found who stole his things. Ivy, in the form of Daphne, paled. The charges on her would be stealing from a professor, impersonating another student without their permission, intent to infiltrate another house's common room. This could very well end up in expulsion. She could clearly imagine how her mother and father would feel if this got out. But it seemed that her capturer wasn't done as he dropped another bombshell on her. Plus, I am now sure that Crabbe and Goyle I just saw now weren't the real one, said Quinn. Those two are dumb, but not enough to forget the location of a place they have been living in for 1.5 years. He stared into her eyes and raised the wand. So, Ms. Ivy Potter, tell me, what should I do with you? Ivy was beyond the point of shock and panic, and a strange clarity filled her. How did you know it is me? Quinn pointed at her wand. I remember this wand. I remember it from the dueling club. He pointed at his temple and smirked. You see, I have an excellent memory. He raised his hand to point in behind towards the dungeon entrance. I am willing to bet good money that those two were Harry Potter and Ronald Weasley. His smirk widened. Now, imagine what would happen if I alert Professor Snape that 2 Gryffindors are inside the Slytherin common room. After the flying car incident, this would definitely kick those 2 out of the school. Ivy was once again back to feeling massive panic. Her father had faced a lot of criticism because of Harry's action at the start of the year. James Potter was an Auror, and one of their responsibilities was to maintain the international statute of secrecy. It did not look good when one of his children was caught breaking the same code that could reveal the existence of magic to the world. I am willing to forget all of this if you owe me a huge favor. He tapped her nose before continuing. I am willing to spare your brother's reputation by letting all of this go. He is already suffering because of the whole air of Slytherin, and if he gets expelled, no matter what the reason, people would believe they sacked him for all the petrifications. Ivy was sure that she was about to die from shock. Harry's reputation was already at rock bottom because of the ridiculous rumor. She was sure that if the situation was given time, then Harry's reputation would improve. But right now, it would ruin Harry Potter, and in turn Potter family's reputation. Quinn stood straighter and spoke in a deeper voice. "So, what is your decision, Potter Princess?" Ivy gulped before nodding. She had no choice but to agree. "All right, I will do whatever you want. So don't reveal any of this." Quinn hummed with a bright smile before turning stern. "Don't try to refuse this later because it will not go the way you want to. Do you understand?" Ivy nodded with a hard expression. "Say that you understand." "I understand," she spat out. "Good," said Quinn, and the wall went back to normal, and the ropes restraining her also loosened before vanishing. Quinn patted her cheek before saying, "Now, go hide until the effects of the potion wear off. Daphne is my friend, and I don't want a lookalike roaming around." He pointed at the wall behind her. "Your wand is right there." When Ivy looked back, she saw her wand stuck to the wall. "It will come off in half a minute," said Quinn. "Now, while it was good profiting off you, I am a busy person, so I would take my leave." Quinn softly smiled before walking away, leaving Ivy stunned, looking between Quinn's retreating and her wand stuck to the wall. Her thoughts were that this operation went nothing like she was expecting. Harry and Hermione's plan had been dismantled within minutes. They had thought that it would be a fairly straightforward plan for them to get the information from Draco, but the plan had failed before it even started. Hermione, for some reason, didn't come with them. Quinn West had caught her, restrained her, and had revealed her identity. Plus, he had forced her into being under his debt. She didn't know how Ron and Harry were doing without her to guide them. Those two fools didn't even know the location of the Slytherin common room. Quinn West came in like a cool breeze and left like a terrifying typhoon. She would later find out that even though Harry and Ron had successfully gained entry to the Slytherin common room and had talked to Draco Malfoy, it turned out that Malfoy wasn't the one to open the Chamber of Secret. So, they were back to square one. And not to mention the accident Hermione had with the Polyjuice Potion and had gained a tail. When Ivy Potter found all of this, she, without an ounce of doubt and hesitation, classified this mission as a big fat failure. Harry Potter heavily sighed as he walked toward the bathroom. He wasn't in a great mood. The entire school was literally against him and considered him the next Dark Lord. Everyone blamed him for the petrification of the Muggle-born students. And because of it, he was being avoided like the plague. Before, everyone would become noisy when he entered, but now? Now, they would quiet down and avert their eyes so that they wouldn't catch his eyes. There were select few people he could spend time with, and now one of them was stuck in the hospital wing because she added the wrong hair into her Polyjuice Potion. Harry and Hermione quarreled a lot, but Harry seriously considered her to be one of his closest friends because of all the help she was last year. And, people who faced a troll and deadly obstacles together were bound to develop some camaraderie. This year was the same. Hermione was the one to come up with the Polyjuice plan despite her love of rules and authority, showing that she treasured their friendship. His twin sister as well was acting weird and looked stressed about something since the whole Polyjuice plan. She didn't join them inside the Slytherin common room because someone stopped her, she didn't specify who. When he asked what was wrong, she said that nothing was wrong and she was just stressed about Hermione and the Chamber of Secrets, but Harry could tell that there was something else. He stopped push when she started to get irritated and had left the matter alone. Finally, Ron was well. Ron. While he laughed at Hermione's furry appearance, Harry could tell that his best friend was worried about their friend. Harry, somewhere in his heart, blamed himself for dragging them in all this mess, and now all of them were stressed and worried. While Harry was brooding about his, depressing thoughts collided with someone and yelled, "Hey, watch it, man." But the other person didn't even look at him or say sorry and just ran off. "Jerk," muttered Harry, and when he turned to walk, his foot kicked something. He looked down to see a small thin book with a shabby black cover. Harry picked it up and turned back to return it, but the person had already run off and out of his sight. Lowering his eyes to examine the thin book, Harry saw at once that it was a diary, and the faded year on the cover told him it was 50 years old. He opened it, and on the first page of the diary, Harry could barely read out the name, T.M. Riddle, written in smudged ink. When he turned the pages, and there were no words written on the pages. In the quiet and eerie corridor stood the lone figure of Harry Potter, staring at the black diary clutched in his hand with an unblinking gaze. Chapter 60, Calm Day, and Ivy's Heir of Slytherin Theory. It was a rare moment of peace in the last few months as Quinn laid in the cool grass looking up at the sky. The past few months had been a rollercoaster for Quinn. His magic has been going through rapid change, not only in quantity but also in control. There were many types of magic that Quinn didn't think were possible for him for a couple of years were now within his grasps. His magic did his bidding with no complaints, and almost every day, dummies and targets of the room and requirements would get annihilated into smithereens. The restricted section of Hogwarts library had also proven to be helpful. The thing about the room of requirement was that it had been hidden for so long that nobody knew how it operated, and as such, no one knew how to add books to it. The books and tomes in the room of requirement's knowledge base were extremely old. The books were from the founder's time, and as far as Quinn could tell, they weren't updated from that time, which meant that the room of requirement was missing out on a millennium's worth of advancements in magic. The room of requirements had a lot of knowledge that would be classified as lost knowledge. Lost knowledge was the knowledge about fields of magic lost to the magical civilization with time, but the thing about that lost magical knowledge from room of requirements was that a lot of it was too complex for Quinn. While Quinn's magical prowesses grew at an unprecedented rate, his knowledge about magic didn't experience a similar boost. He was still building his magical knowledge step by step. So, the restricted section of Hogwarts library came in as resourceful, because Hogwarts did a decent job at supplementing their library with new books throughout the ages. Quinn did notice that even though there was a lot of information about magic that could be hazardous if not handled or properly understood, there was nothing too crazy in the library. Dumbledore moderating the books in the library was one of Quinn's theories. Another theory was that Hogwarts was a school for children who came here to learn to control their magic. Those children might not need books that delved into high-level complexities about magic. As such, the Hogwarts administration never thought of buying books above a certain level. The magical world, and not just magical Britain, didn't have a university system for higher education. Instead, it followed an apprentice system to gain higher knowledge about magic. You could buy high-level magic knowledge for the right price, but most people only did it when they gained a master to apprentice under because magic grew more and more dangerous as you dove deeper into its mysteries. Researching esoteric magic without guidance could be fatal, and as such, people needed some form of teaching to get started. The restricted section of Hogwarts library had some fascinating books and tomes. Quinn had been quite busy greedily researching knowledge that would supplement what he already knew. In Quinn's eyes, Lockhart had finally done something worthwhile with his life by signing the permission note to the restricted section for him. Between studying, having fun, and enjoying himself, Quinn had been quite busy. Today, he found himself free from everything, lying down in the grass looking at the white clouds slowly floating in the sky. He felt as free as the clouds he was gazing at. Quinn didn't feel angry when he looked at Lockhart's stupid face. He didn't feel elated when he received the weekly sales report of Lockhart goods. His daily run didn't leave him so tired that he wanted to sleep the entire day. He didn't randomly make his way to the kitchen to stuff his face with food. Last night's dueling lesson didn't inspire superiority inside Quinn. His eyes didn't immediately follow a group of older girls when they walked by, looking all nice. And he didn't feel the weekly bout of jealousy at Madame Hooch's excellent broom-riding skill. But, even with his calm, Quinn didn't question his behavior this entire school year. He didn't even think that something was wrong with his behavior. To him, his year had been like a fun roller coaster, but nothing wrong. It was a peaceful day, and while Quinn enjoyed the time he was having for the past few months, he enjoyed this calm and quiet day. Quinn peacefully smiled and spoke without looking to his side. "So, how have you been finding Hogwarts?" he asked his companion, who laid in the grass with him, similarly looking at the clouds, or at least he thought she was. "It is fun, but I think Nargles took some of my belongings," said the girl beside him. "They are known to be quite the naughty thieves." Quinn's eyes narrowed, and he felt a bout of anger climb up into his mind. While she thought Nargles were stealing her stuff, Quinn knew better. "Do you want me to help?" he offered, a nasty grin forming on his face. If you leave it up to me, then Nargles would return your stuff and never, ever, and I mean it, never will they steal your stuff ever again. One word from her, and he would tear those shitheads apart, enjoying every single moment of the process. Luna Lovegood turned her head to face him and spoke, "No, it is fine. The Nargles will return my stuff. They might be naughty, but they won't go overboard." Quinn pursed his lips and took a deep breath to curb his anger, imagining it draining into the vast ground below him. "All right, but if the Nargles ever disturb you too much, tell it to me," Quinn spoke seriously. "I will take care of them." I will call you," spoke Luna, raising her hand towards the sky as if trying to grab the clouds in her grasp. The anger finally left him, and Quinn closed his eyes, feeling the ground below him. He channeled magic into the ground around him and focused on the grass below and around him. It was a unique sensation of his magic covering thousands of blades of grass, filling them with energy, providing them with another source of vitality other than the sunlight from the glorious sun, the giver of life. "Feels good," thought Quinn, a calm bliss spreading through his body and mind. He tapped into his magic core, and more ground was saturated with his magic. Quinn's magic did nothing to the ground or the grass. He didn't make his magic do anything. He was just extending his magic, nothing more or nothing less. But, in a few years, there would be a few trees growing here in the same spot, a holly tree, the tree of luck, a rowan tree, the wizard's tree, and an alder tree, the fairy's favorite tree. The relaxed boy didn't know that last night, the stars in the night sky had aligned in a special arrangement, providing him ease against the condition he was facing. A condition he knew nothing about or even knew that he had said condition. It was just the calm before the storm. Ivy Potter looked outside the window in her dorm room. She shared the dorm room with Parvati Patil, Lavender Brown, and Hermione Granger. The presence of the four girls divided the room into four different styles. Parvati's section was all girly and a little messy. Lavender's section was similarly girly pink but a lot cleaner than her best friend's. Hermione's side was filled with books and faintly smelled of parchment and ink. Her part of the room was practical. She had textbooks but didn't have as much as Hermione. Her room was neater than Lavender's but less than Hermione's. She also possessed things that a normal teenage girl would have but didn't go overboard like Parvati. Distinct from her roommates, Ivy had many pictures of her friends and family on her sides, walls and table. Many happy memories were captured in the framed photos, all of them magically charmed to move, showing the happiness of the moments. The redhead's mind was filled with thoughts about the past few months. Ever since the day she and her friends have drunk Polyjuice Potion to get some answers, things had gone downhill. She was caught and blackmailed into owing an enormous debt to a guy she didn't want to owe anything at all. Ivy had felt helpless when he took her wand, even without her knowing, and trapped her inside a wall. Hermione had mixed Tracy Davis's pet cat's hair into her Polyjuice Potion, and it caused a reaction, turning her into a furry cat girl. Ivy's best friend had to spend a lot of time in the hospital wing, hiding from others. Her brother had found a diary with the initials TM Riddle. Ron had led them to the trophy room to show that the guy was a head boy and won an award from the school for his meritorious services. The same diary had given them a clue about the Chamber of Secrets. It turned out Tom Riddle had gotten the award because he caught the person who opened the Chamber of Secret 50 years ago. Shockingly, it was someone she knew. Rubeus Hagrid, the gamekeeper at Hogwarts, and one of her dear friends had opened the Chamber of Secrets when he was attending Hogwarts. But, ever since getting the diary, Harry had gotten quiet and talked little to anybody and spent a lot of time alone. He wrote in the diary a lot, apparently talking to Tom Riddle's diary was her brother's newest obsession. But that all changed when Harry lost the diary and became irritable, taking out his anger on random people in Gryffindor. He looked for the diary a lot but couldn't find anything. Eventually, he stopped looking for the diary, and his behavior improved, but he still acted as the world owed him money. Just when Ivy thought things were improving, another attack happened, and they found a Muggle-born Ravenclaw girl petrified in one of the bathrooms, lying on the floor. She was found the next day after a search when she didn't show up for any classes. Then things took another dip for the worse because the minister came for Hagrid and took him away because of all the petrifications. On top of all that, Malfoy and the Board of Governors suspended Dumbledore from his position as the headmaster. Then her brother and Ron did something stupid and went into the Forbidden Forest, and almost got killed by Hagrid's deadly human flesh-loving pet, Aragog the Acromantula. An acromantula was a giant magical species of spider. They were spiders the size of cart horses, eight-eyed, eight-legged, black, hairy, and gigantic. Ivy? Hearing her name broke her away from her thoughts, and when she looked back, she saw her best friend, a worried look on her face. Yes, asked Ivy, turning her body to face Hermione. What is happening? You have been looking stressed in the last few days, asked Hermione, moving closer and sitting on Ivy's bed. Ivy looked down at her hands, contemplating something before looking up at Hermione and saying, I think I know who opened the Chamber of Secrets. Ivy carefully spoke, thinking about her every word. I am not completely sure, but I think I know the identity of heir of Slytherin. Hermione's eyes widened to the size of golf balls, and her brows disappeared up her hairline. Who is it? Ivy gulped before saying, I think it is Quinn West. Hermione's wide eyes immediately turned into a frown. Ivy, I know you don't like him, but you can't just blame Dash. Ivy grabbed Hermione's hand and cut Hermione off. I am not saying this because I don't like him. I have some reasons behind the accusation. And, what are they? Ivy looked uncomfortable for a second before steeling herself and revealing the thing she had kept a secret. The day we used the Polyjuice Potion, do you remember how I said I didn't make it to the Slytherin common room because I got caught up in something? Hermione nodded, not knowing where this was going. Well, West was the one who caught me, said Ivy and watched Hermione gasp. Everybody knew that Quinn West was Daphne Greengrass's friend. If Ivy met Quinn while she was transformed into Daphne, then… Ivy confirmed her doubts. He immediately recognized me and then trapped me. Ivy gritted her teeth and continued, he trapped me in a damn wall and took away my wand after a simple exchange of words. Hermione could see the anger and frustration in Ivy's eyes as she continued, it was like he already knew I wasn't Daphne even before we talked. Every sentence he spoke was a test to see if I was Daphne. Ivy told Hermione about their conversation before Ivy was trapped. How did he know I wasn't Daphne with a single look? He then somehow deduced that Crabbe and Goyle were Ron and Harry. It made me think, what if heir of Slytherin could tell if a student was from Slytherin house or not? Ivy put down her theory. West saw us and immediately could tell we weren't Slytherin students and were just imposters. He blackmailed me into owing him a favor in exchange for not talking about the incident. Ivy heavily exhaled before saying, I agreed. Hermione squeezed her friend's hand and said, Ivy, I am sorry you had to go through that. She paused for a moment before continuing, but, this is just a theory. Ivy shook her head and shifted in her spot. I know, but let me tell you about Mrs. Norris' petrification. Ivy explained what she saw that day. The look of recognition in Quinn's eyes and the relief while he saw the scene. It was like he already knew this was about to happen. Who else but the heir of Slytherin, the person who opened the Chamber of Secrets, would know about the attack? Hermione was about to say that this was still not enough and just Ivy's dislike for Quinn West clouding her judgment, but Ivy raised her hand and continued. Do you know West is famous for staying outside after curfew, said Ivy, elaborating on her reasoning. I asked around, and everybody in the Ravenclaw house knows that West stays outside after curfew. He only comes back late in the night. She grabbed Hermione's shoulders and continued. He did it the entire last year, and from what I heard, he did it every day, and not once was he caught. Her voice raised as she continued, what if West was looking for the Chamber of Secrets the entire last year and found it? He didn't get caught because no one knew the chamber's location, and he stayed inside. And this year, he released Slytherin's monster. Ivy licked her lips and looked Hermione in the eye, and, I don't know how this adds up, but do you remember about West's ring? Hermione frowned before nodding, yes, the gold ring, what about it? He didn't have it last year, and he started wearing it this year. Ivy thought about the gold ring, which caught her attention every time she looked at Quinn West. What if the ring controls the Slytherin's monster? Listening to Ivy listing off points against Quinn West did make her believe her friends, at least somewhat. I don't know, Ivy, said Hermione, there are too many what ifs in there. I know. That is why I think that we should go to West's AID office, said Ivy, he spends a lot of time in there. Maybe there is something in there. We may find something there that connects him to the Chamber of Secrets. Hermione bit on her lower lip, thinking about the petrified students. She didn't want any more to get petrified, so if they could find a lead, that would stop this. All right, I will go with you, she stood up and said, come on, we should tell the boys. Ivy grabbed her arm and stopped Hermione. No. We can't do that. The boys would be reckless and maybe even jump west without thinking. We should do this alone. Hermione needed no more convincing, agreed. Let's do this alone. All right, when should we do this? We would need the third-year schedule for Ravenclaw, Hermione thought out loud. After that, we would need to find an hour when he has a class, and we don't, so we would have time to get in his office and exit without him knowing. Ivy felt relieved when Hermione started to build a plan. Hermione taking the lead to help her friends was normal, and currently, Ivy was craving normal. It was decided. Ivy Potter and Hermione Granger were going to break into the AID office owned and operated by Quinn West. This marks the end of part 15 of the story, Magical Journey in Harry Potter World. Thank you for listening. Please like the video and hit the subscribe button to listen more. Hit the bell icon to get notified of all the new content uploaded to the channel ASAP.